Here he is, Jeff Paterson, one half of the rink-wide duo with Andrew Wadden, our Canucks reporter, following a shootout victory at the Saddle Dome in Calgary against the Flames. How we doing, Jeff?
Yeah, doing all right. And dare I say that maybe the win over the Flames indicated a little bit of maturity on the part of this Vancouver Canucks team that's been searching for structure all year. I think earlier in the year, guys, when they flush a 2-0 lead like that on the road, they go into complete panic mode. And instead, last night, Sheldon Dries answers 2 minutes after the 3-2 goal. And from there, I thought actually the Canucks were the better team. Like, in the third period, I know they got outshot, but in terms of scoring chances, the Canucks had the better scoring chances in the third, and then overtime, no question. The Canucks probably should have been able to put it away there, took them the shootout, but they end up getting the victory on the road. 6 straight road wins now. I was looking it up earlier today. Only twice in franchise history have the Vancouver Canucks recorded more consecutive road wins than this 6-game streak, which is pretty modest in the grand scheme. And, of course, a bunch of them have been in overtime and last 8 in a shootout. But, hey, a win's a win for this team that's trying to stay relevant in this playoff mix. And the other thing is it's a win in the division. And I remember the morning that they went into Seattle late in October, and they were winless at that point. They were 7 games in. They still hadn't had a victory. And I said to you guys, and at that point I was scratching for any sort of silver lining to grasp onto, but I said the one thing they do have going for them is the bulk of their games are against the West. They've played mostly the East. They went out on that Eastern road trip. They came home. They played Buffalo and Carolina. Guys, they're 7-2 within the Pacific Division, which really is one of the reasons that they have stayed within an arm's reach of a lot of those teams that are also sort of scratching and clawing for a playoff position.
That was their biggest win last night. That was their win over their best opponent. That was a team 3 games over 500 going into the contest in the last 5.
Which is astonishing, really, that you can get to mid-December and only have that your best win is against a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. They get the home games now, and we've talked about that as well. And their next opportunity, Jeff, to extend this road winning streak and the Pacific Division record is a week from Friday. At Edmonton, coming off a Thursday home game against Seattle. Typically, when we say shorty in a Vancouver Canucks context, it's play-by-play man John Shorthouse, who we actually saw here yesterday in the Go-Goat Sports studio. But how about this patchwork line on a night when the big guns aren't really going as much, Jeff, to put 5'9", 5'9", and 5'10", Höglander, who's supposed to be a healthy scratch, with Dries and Garland. And yes, and they turn in to the Canucks' best line.
Yeah, and so drama follows this group wherever it goes. And, of course, Brock Boeser takes the warm-up, and then Kelly Rudy reported that he left the ice with about 6 minutes to go in the warm-up, and maybe that was the first indication that all was not well with Boeser. But, Brock really hasn't responded to all of the noise around him. After the first time, it looked like he was going to be a healthy scratch. Now, I'll take them at face value. Elias Pettersson missed practice the other day. We have seen illnesses kind of run through teams. But still, when you see Brock Boeser as a scratch, you can't help but think, is it connected to all the other drama that's gone on around him? But Nils Höglander looked like he was going to be the healthy scratch, and then he has to, in short order, sticking with the theme of the question here, he had to scramble to get ready and get his game face on, and he was terrific. Easily his most invested effort of the season, the 2 assists, he had 3 hits, he drew a penalty, hit a crossbar at one point. So, more of that. And it's not that Nils Höglander doesn't give you the effort, it's just there hasn't been much of a bottom line. And it's just been so bizarre to see him go from the top line to the press box. There's no real in-between with Nils Höglander. So, look, if Boeser's healthy enough on Saturday and gets back in, somebody is going to have to come out of the lineup. So there'll be a decision there. And I guess that begs the question, what have you done for me lately? Does Bruce Boudreau see a game like that from Dries and Garland and Höglander and say, hey, maybe I've hit on something? My guess is yes. Like, why would you go away from that at this stage? Give them another opportunity. If it doesn't work, then you can look for a plan B there. But first of all, I want to see about Boeser's health. It's a full team day off for them here on this Thursday, so they'll get back to practice. They don't play until Saturday. But, little guys that hustle. And, I know a lot of people think, hey, Connor Garland overdue. I was surprised to see the dunking on Twitter last night about, he's back and, that's the Connor. Like, sorry, I need to see it for a 5 and a 10-game stretch where he's highly productive. yes, it was a nice goal. It looked like it was a big goal, 30 seconds after Horvat had opened the scoring. But let's be honest, it's now 2 goals in 21 games for Connor Garland. He's sitting at 5 on the season as they bump up against the 30-game mark. So for those that are dunking, I would say just, slow the roll a touch. But let's hope that you can't start a streak of any kind without that first one, whether it's a team effort or an individual. Let's hope that there's more where that came from, because that line, it was terrific last night.
I'd also say that he was the third best of the 3 in totality for the 60-minute contest as well. I also wonder, we talked about this off the top, Jeff, but, with the AHL players playing as well as they are, the forwards, that is, I wonder if they feel some pressure, because it's going to be top 9. The best AHL players right now are the scorers, not so much the Will Lockwoods of the world, the guys that can play maybe further down the lineup, but the top end scorers who aren't going to come in and play on that fourth line. They're going to come in and play in a top 9 role. They should feel some pressure from Abbotsford right now with the way that Abbotsford is pouring on the offense.
Yeah, I mean, Lane Peterson looked like a throw-in in the Ethan Bear deal, and all this guy does is score 17 goals in 18 games now for the Baby Canucks after the hat-trick in the first period last night. It's kind of funny. His numbers look a lot like Bo Horvat's, just at the AHL level, though. A ton of goals, not many assists, and the one thing that works against Lane Peterson is this team really doesn't need an injection of more offense, right? So you want guys to perform in the AHL. You want to reward them if they do. And I have to think that management is certainly aware of all that he's doing. But this isn't a team that's struggling, and you're thinking, like, give him a shot because he could be a boost to an ailing offense. That is not the case for the Vancouver Canucks. And if you wanted to make the case that, hey, you could give Lane Peterson a chance and swap him out with Sheldon Dries, again, he doesn't have a lot in the way of setups and assists at the AHL level. So is he going to be the guy if Boeser gets into the lineup, if Garland is on his wing? Is that the kind of player that they're looking at? But I'm always of the opinion, and this is when the farm team was in Utica, and we heard sort of anecdotally that a lot of the guys there wondered, is anybody from the big league team noticing what's going on? Is anybody coming in to see us? At least with Abbotsford, they know they're seen, right? Like Ryan Johnson is there, hands-on, working hand-in-hand with the front office here. And we've seen, whether it's Cammy Granato, whether it's Patrick Alvin, Derek Clancy, they get out to Abbotsford and they see these guys. And I think that matters to guys that are, in the farm system and trying to do their thing. So will we see Lane Peterson? I don't know. But how can you not take notice of a guy that has scored basically a goal per game since arriving on the scene here? And at the very least, he's certainly turned out to be nice AHL depth for this organization.
And, of course, the other part of that trade did really well last night for the Canucks as well, and Ethan Bear, who got a lot of attention after the game.
Yeah, and Ethan Bear has come in and has settled in nicely. And I think it made sense that the first maybe 5 or 8 games, he hadn't played at all this year. He's adjusting to a new system, his third system in relatively short order in the National Hockey League, adjusting to, he's back in the Pacific Division, but it's a new set of teammates, new circumstances, all that kind of stuff. So, there was an adjustment period, but I would say since his 5th or 6th game, he really has settled in. And I think it's also really interesting, guys, was looking at this, that the first 16 games of the season, the Canucks penalty killing was a shade over 61%, and it was sinking them. It was single-handedly leading to losses, as it did around this time last year as well. In the last 13 games, though, the Canucks are 9-4 as a team, and a big part of that is their penalty kills now at 80% in that run. It's still not where it needs to be overall, but in the last 13 games, penalty kill very respectable at 80%, and Ethan Bear is a part of that. Curtis Lazar getting healthy and getting back in. They're getting saves. Ultimately, I think that is the biggest difference, but why are they getting saves? Because I do think that we are seeing some of this elusive structure that isn't necessarily on display in other areas of the game. But I do think that they figured we're not seeing the cross seam passes. We're not seeing one-timers. So goalies are making saves, but I think the guys in front of the goaltenders are doing a better job doing their job when it comes to penalty kill. And I also think some of it's personnel. They have backed off OEL as a penalty killer. Bear has stepped in. He's been added to that mix. And so proof's in the pudding that the penalty kill has been better. In fact, in that 13-game run, they've only been torched for 2 power play goals in a game once, and that was by Colorado, who had the best power play in the NHL at the time. And, one of their power play goals was a 5-on-3 that night. So you really are seeing teams are going to score. power plays happen. Calgary got a power play goal last night, but they're not allowing the one power play goal that they're giving up to absolutely do them in. And so that is a big step in the right direction. And Ethan Bear has been a part of that, no question.
Is anybody getting JT Miller vibes with Ethan Bear? And what I mean by that is moves on to a third NHL organization, and that's the wake-up call, right? Like JT came here and he said, look, he took it seriously. He realized where his NHL career was going after the moves from the Rangers and then to
Could
Tampa.
He do that again, by the way?
He had work ethic issues in New York. AV wasn't going to play him until he saw him doing everything that he needed to do from the standpoint of work ethic. And then in Tampa, of course, he got lost a little bit in the shuffle, and kind of like Ethan Bear got lost in the shuffle with the Carolina Blue Line. But you make it to your third team, and of course, Bear had a few of the work ethic concerns around his game as well. And suddenly it's the wake-up call once you get to your third organization. Jeff, he's been invaluable for the Canucks when you look at right side defense and how much it was necessary. In fact, I think you'd almost make the case that he's as valuable to the Canucks as newcomer Andrei Kuzmenko has been with all his scoring.
Yeah, to your first point about the wake-up call, I think for anybody, I mean, that's human nature. You're on your third team. Like, it's a privilege to play in the NHL. It's not a right. Nobody's giving you these opportunities, and you don't want to let too many of them slide by. Now, there was COVID that was involved. He was coming from a Carolina team that, for whatever reason, he just didn't seem to fit there, but they also had a much better defense than the Vancouver Canucks did. So he comes here, he's getting an opportunity that he didn't have, and he seems to be in a pretty good place in his life. I saw him tweet out last week that he's going to be a father here early in the new year. And back on the West Coast, he seems to have settled in, played his junior in Seattle. So these are, sort of familiar. I laughed when he arrived here, one of the first interviews, and he was asked about the rain. And he said, I played junior in Seattle. I love the rain. Well, he's getting his share of that here in the winter months. But, he's been a nice addition. He's in that age range that Jim Rutherford always talks about, right? Sort of that 25, 26 and under. Those are the pieces that they're trying to assemble here. And I just like the fact that, he goes about his business. Like, there's not a lot of fanfare to his game, but he does play the modern game of getting back, retrieving pucks, moving them forward, and letting the forwards do their thing. And he doesn't generate a ton of offense, but he doesn't spend a lot of time defending either. And so, if they've already got Quinn Hughes, who does generate a lot of offense, and I think they're pretty happy with Ethan Bear and what he does bring to this mix. And so, he's the kind of guy. And the other thing, too, guys, it's a contract year. Keep that in mind, and I'm sure that's not lost on Ethan Bear. And so I think that the Canucks, they like what they've seen. My guess is that they do want to lock him up, and I wonder if there's a way to give him a little bit of security and keep that AAV down for a guy that, looks like he could be part of what they're trying to put together here now and moving forward.
Let me ask you the Bodog poll question. Will the Canucks still trade Bo Horvat if they're contending for a playoff spot? We, of course, saw this with JT Miller last year, Jeff, where they held on to him for that final quarter of the season because they hoped to make a late run to the postseason. Do you think there's any possibility history repeats itself with Bo Horvat?
I hope not. Last year, you're right. They held on to their pieces and ultimately came up short. Even if they had squeezed in, their prize would have been a head-on collision with the Colorado Avalanche in the opening round. Nashville was the second wild card, and unfortunately for the Preds, remember they lost UC Saros late in the season. They didn't have their number one goaltender going up against the top seed, so they really didn't stand a chance. But and you can't really play this game. But the what if Bo Horvat and Thatcher Demko were both injured at the end of last season as well. So even if the Canucks had managed to squeeze in, they had injury issues too. But no, I think for the here and now, again, we've got to get past this idea of just get in and you have a chance and something can happen. And the idea of a couple of home playoff dates, no, they did it last year and it didn't work for them. They cannot run the risk of Bo Horvat just walking away as an unrestricted free agent. The Calgary Flames were able to play that with Johnny Hockey because they had legitimate designs on winning the Stanley Cup last year. Yeah. And they were a team that, look, they lost to the Oilers in the Battle of Alberta, but it doesn't change the storylines that they were built for a better run in the playoffs. They had legitimate designs on a lengthy playoff run. Ultimately, some things go sideways on you. The Vancouver Canucks are not in that position, even with a win over Calgary last night. Still not above the playoff bar. Haven't spent a night above the playoff bar yet this season. Saturday night will be the first opportunity. Well, no, they had an opportunity the other night against Minnesota. Didn't take it. But, at the 30-game mark, they could be above NHL 500 for the first time with a win over the Winnipeg Jets. So all this work and all of the scrambling they've done after the slow start just to get back to, some sort of baseline, no, they can't. If they've set their course here, they have to stick with it this year for the good of the franchise in the years to come.
Do you believe, Dollywell mentioned to us on Friday, they may be in the market for a veteran backup goaltender to sort of patch the dam until Demko comes back? I mean, they've played well enough here to stay in it. Would you support?
They're only a third of the way there. 6 weeks. Yeah.
Would you support a low cost veteran backup here if you can find one, just to patch the dam in goal until Demko gets back?
I'm going to say no to that for a couple of reasons. One is the trade freeze goes into effect here after Saturday night. So I think Spencer Martin has sort of, but they play on Saturday, and then the trade freeze goes in before the next game after that. So, if you'd asked me this question last week, coming off the Montreal and San Jose game, 7-6 and 6-5, might have considered a little bit more, but I don't see anything happening here before the trade freeze. And then, I guess, out of the trade freeze, if things go sideways, then you have to revisit it. But by then, you're almost a month into the Demko injury, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel of getting him back. Up against it salary cap wise, I just don't think that you're going to bring in a guy. What does that do when Demko is back? I think Spencer Martin, I thought Martin was their best player against Minnesota the other night, and had another night last night. I didn't love the 2-2 goal that kind of got under him, but otherwise, third period, game on the line, made a couple of big stops, and then obviously stares down all three shooters in the shootout. So I think Spencer Martin has leveled up here the last couple of games to kind of mute that conversation just a little bit. But it's interesting when you said earlier about, the next chance to extend this road win streak is in Edmonton, the game before Christmas. But as you also mentioned, they play at home against Seattle the night before. Is Colin Delia going to get the Edmonton game against McDavid and Draisaitl and the way that they're going in that power play?
Can you imagine?
So I'm curious to see what they do with their goaltending. Do you give Colin Delia the Seattle Kraken and save Spencer Martin for the night? Martin can't play them all. Demko wouldn't play them all if he was healthy. So I do think at some point here, and if Spencer Martin starts on Saturday, and I certainly expect that he will, that'll be 30 games for the Vancouver Canucks. It'll be 15 starts for Spencer Martin and 15 starts for Thatcher Demko. Some through injury, obviously, but also some through circumstance earlier in the year when Demko just didn't have it.
Marvelous stat, Jeff.
And he's 9-3.
Yeah,
9-3.
For a team that hasn't been above 500 all year. It's amazing.
And he's got personal stats that are deplorable under our modern day barometer, but he's 9-3. So
well, last night was just the second time this year that the Canucks have won a game scoring 3 or fewer. They did it against Arizona with the 3-2 overtime win. Last night, 3 goals in a 4-3 shootout win, but only put 3 pucks in the net in a run of play. So 13 wins, 11 of them have come with 4 or more goals, and that's just kind of in the story of this team. So last night went against the form, but they needed some saves from Spencer Martin late, and he delivered. So, you're right. Wow. I mean, his individual numbers aren't spectacular, but it is hard to argue with the wins and losses that this guy's delivered coming in a pinch as a number one guy for the first time in his NHL career.
Great stuff, Jeff. Thank you for this. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll catch up next week.
All right, guys. Thank you.